Wake Me Up After the Apocalypse by Evil Goo. Chapter 9. Trust. Usopp could not reconcile the two realities in his head. The world where he had traveled to the new world with his nakama, and the one where everything had been destroyed. He held in his hands something horrible and unexplainable, and no matter how he tried to write it off, he simply could not. The goggles were proof. Nami was telling the truth, at least in part, but then, if she was right about them never meeting up again in Sabodi, easily the most implausible part of her story, why would she lie about something as horrific as they had no home to return to? No, that couldn't be right. He was going to become a brave warrior of the sea, and when he got back to Syrup, people were waiting. She was waiting. He realized with a sudden start that he was at risk of cracking his spectral goggles, the mysterious object that had no right to exist, in his increasingly tight fist. He dropped them to his lap, stretching out his cramped fingers. Shit. Shit. There's no good way to tell someone about this. It's my first time having to do so. With Dion, Law handled it. Law is not tactful. I was worried you'd freak out if it didn't come from me. That was a bit optimistic of her. I can freak out just fine either way, he answered, attempting to sound light and humorous, but the words falling flat and monotone on his tongue. We went there, to East Blue, 3 years ago. Witheria is safe. Even if spores somehow got up here, Law can create panacea to clear them from our systems. It's pretty hard to come by the main ingredient, though, so he hates to waste it. The vines can't reach us here. She paused, making a motion like she was tucking hair behind her ear, but her pixie cut was too short. It was too dangerous. The red was too thick for us to safely touch down there more than a couple times. But we could see each island, get close with skyboats. It's not hard to tell. The islands that are full of sleepers, the ones full of sleepwalkers, and the ones full of, well, it's not the most delicate term, but the dead, husks. She was scooting back on the bed, joining him in leaning against the wall, shoulder to shoulder. He had, indeed, noticed her tears earlier. There were more now. Before, he could count on one hand the number of times he had seen Nami cry real tears. Now, she seemed to be going for a record in 24 hours. If what she was saying was true, though, she was entitled to them. Kokoyashi is gone, she managed, wiping at her face in a very violent, angry way. Our captain and our nakama are all missing. I never thought, that I would find any of you. I was all alone, even with the community. Alone, even surrounded by others. He understood that feeling quite intimately. Their crew was their family. He wasn't quite sure what to do as the sinking feeling inside him became a dragging anchor. She was crying, and even though he was the one in shock, he considered how long she had been holding back. As she sat by his bedside, waiting for him to wake up, while she smiled at the people they came across, introducing him, grabbing things for him from the storage barn. For all the time, 4 freaking years, if she was to be believed, that she had fretted and missed her people. Usopp couldn't have handled it alone. That was his nightmare, to be alone and know that you would never see the people you cared about ever again, just sitting with that day after day for 4 years. Usopp wasn't quite that strong, but unlike Nami, he hadn't had to suffer through that. He hadn't been alone, at least. She told him it was all a hallucination. That part still didn't feel quite right with him. He had been with the crew, all together, fighting side by side. He thought of how to comfort her, feeling anxiety as he tried to puzzle it out. How does one comfort a crying woman? He had tried a hand to her shoulder before, and she had just stiffened like he had burned her. He should just keep his hands to himself and sit there and wait for her to be able to talk again. Yeah. He still had questions. Her breath was shaky, but she struggled to intake enough air to talk. I found you by a complete fluke. Can you imagine? Middle of nowhere in paradise, on a giant rotting plant. Nothing of use to be found anywhere. If I had left after collecting the flowers, or if we had decided to go south weeks before when plotting our best course, or... Ugh! She slapped her hands over her eyes, her growl of annoyance somewhat of a relief to Usopp. This was more normal, more familiar to him. She should be angry, not sad. That would be better suited to Nami. It doesn't matter. The point is that I did find you, and now you're here and safe. The universe doesn't just do that, you know? Give you back the dead. That's what it feels like. I know that you did not have a concept of the time that passed, but for me, it was a lifetime. 4 years of hoping and searching and giving up hope. I had no idea where any of you were. I didn't know where to look. I didn't even know if you were alive, so I assumed the worst. Hey, that's my job. And please, do you really think something like an alien plant could take us out? Could take out the great Captain Usopp? Could take out Luffy? She smirked, shaking her head. Alien, huh? Nerd. Law will like that. And you're not wrong about Luffy. I've thought that many times. But if any of them, were alive, wouldn't I know about it? Wouldn't they be out in the world searching for me, for you? Maybe they're sleeping too. But they can't be dead. Luffy can't be dead. He has to become king of the pirates, remember? I remember, she muttered, softly like a prayer, drawing her long legs up and resting her head on her knees. Thanks for the reminder. I guess I needed it. Now would be a good time to say something cool and hopeful, but for the life of him he couldn't think of anything. He didn't want to think too much. Processing East Blue was too much, far too much for his fragile mind just then. He would focus on what could be fixed for now. He could have his own breakdown later. He settled for just leaning sideways slightly, nudging Nami with his shoulders against hers. She looked up, the hint of a smile curling at her lip. She leaned back into him, just a vague shifting of weight, and it was like some kind of energy was exchanged between them. They'd always gathered strength from each other, pushed each other and worked together and gathered up the pieces when the odds became too much. When Usopp was with Luffy, he felt like the captain's energy would overwhelm him and suck him into an unstoppable hurricane. He'd be better and stronger for it. Whether it was the games and antics of daily life or the start of an island adventure, the captain's mischievous snicker could bring out the worst and best in Usopp. Each crew member had their own effect on him. Usopp was the kind of person who adapted to new situations by watching others and feeding off of their energy. When he was at the height of terror, he would think about what the strongest members of the crew would do and try his damnedest to emulate it, often failing, but growing with each attempt. When he was together with everyone at a meal or a party, he would fight to be heard over the cacophony and draw on that cheerful overenthusiasm to embolden his words. When waking up early and grabbing tea from the kitchen, he could soak in the calm energy of Sanji's cooking. There was a rhythm to it, a careful order that only appeared to be chaos, that weirdly put Usopp at ease. When he was with Nami, though, it went both ways. She was adaptable too, though she always fought to keep herself contained in a thin veneer of control. When he was cowardly and shaking, she would usually agree with his assessments, i.e., scream, offering alternatives that made survival seem much more probable. Run away. She would give him little choice but to rise up to challenges, because if they were both weak and full of false composure, then they would both need to be smart and resourceful and rescue each other. They took care of each other when the monsters were fighting far bigger odds and didn't have the luxury of worrying about the weakest Straw Hats. Day to day, when they interacted, it was always more about themselves. Usopp didn't leech off that energy to become something adapted to the situation. He just was. They were neutral to each other, in a good way, balanced. Thinking about it, she was probably the best person to possibly give him the news that the world had ended. He couldn't freak out because he could feel her temporary fragility. He was pushed to be strong, and he knew she felt the same, fighting angrily with her tears and trying to return to that mask of careful control. They had to attempt to be strong for each other, as always. Usopp wasn't always successful in that fight, but he was a work in progress. He would become a brave warrior of the sea. That meant he could wait to grieve. He opted to take a nap in the room with his very few worldly possessions, which currently included a bed and a single blanket. Honestly, he had slept in much worse. Nami's insistence that she would bring him more supplies just made him feel more awkward and out of place, and he had told her he could take care of it himself later. An outwardly thoughtful, generous Nami was just beyond him. It was an affront against God and nature. He liked her better when she was her usual bossy, quick-to-anger, impolite, and blunt self. The Nami that would smile big and genuinely when things went well, when she felt full of confidence, or when she wanted something from him. The Nami that agreed with him about the stupidity of putting oneself in needless danger, but didn't understand how he could immediately shift to admiring self-sacrifice in the name of pride. That Nami might seem impetuous to others, but Usopp understood that it was just her way of showing she was invested. He wondered if she was that weird, hospitable person around the people who lived here, or if she was just being careful with him because she was afraid he'd implode in front of her. It could be a bit of both. He stared up at the ceiling, goggles in hand, feeling the glass lenses with his thumbs as he thought and tried to actually fall asleep for a while. He certainly felt tired. He was going to go to dinner at 5. That's what he told Nami. He had no idea what time it was now. He didn't own a clock. He felt like, based on the information he had, it would only be logical to have some kind of a mental breakdown, just as Nami had probably been dreading. He should be an absolute mess. 1 minute, he was with his friends, making progress on his life goals while supporting his nakama and theirs. He was part of the winning team, ready to take on one of the 4 emperors. Not him. He would be far, far away from that fight. He'd be handling someone further down the chain of command, probably. Ready to save another country. And in a blink, he was back to the weak loser that got his ass kicked on Saboti. This time with the added bonus that everything he cared about was metaphorical dust in the wind. Maybe he hadn't really accepted it. The cool metal of the goggles in his hand was grounding. It pinioned him in reality, not allowing any escape from the truth of Nami's ominous words. So many things were unknown, but she sounded pretty sure about their home islands. If it were true, then what were his goals now? To survive? How basic and uninspiring. What kind of story would his life become at just that? To rescue his crew? That sounded like a better story. Surely Nami had tried, but maybe she had missed something. Maybe if they talked together enough, went over all the details she had picked up since he had been sleeping, he would be able to pick up on something she had not. He knew Nami was very smart, but sometimes she missed the small details. Sometimes she struggled to think outside the box in the same way that Usopp could. Together, they could do more. There was a knock at the door, jolting him out of his thoughts. Nami thought he was sleeping. Besides, would she even knock? It wasn't like he locked the door. She'd probably just bust in. So, had to be another person? One of his, neighbors? It was too weird. Even as a kid, he had lived on the outskirts of town and rarely interacted with people except to yell lies around town. He wasn't a particularly neighborly person. His house was a place to sleep and store his crap, and that was about it. It was weird to be given an entire little home with the assumption that he would live there permanently in the middle of a farming village. It was too mundane for a pirate. Knowing the bizarre, seeming perfection of the community, he guessed it was someone with a freaking welcome basket. That was too weird. He opened the door a crack, peeking out. There was a tall, thin, but fairly well-built man with pink hair cut very short. He had tattoos on his face, little stripes coming from around the corners of his eyes and curving into his hairline, which were usually a pretty good indicator of a pirate. He was wearing leather pants that were too tight and a purple cheetah print vest that was too big, a sharp-toothed grin splitting his face in a way that seemed vaguely reminiscent of a fishman, though he was clearly just a weird-looking human. He seemed just a little too cheerful, his grin just a little too obnoxiously wide. Usopp immediately shut the door in the guy's face. Nope. No thanks to whatever that was. There was a knock again, and he took a deep breath. Okay, thinking logically, he probably shouldn't judge. Some of the nicest people he knew dressed like serial killers, so who was he to be freaked out at a too eager smirk of murder? Trying not to look too terrified, he slowly opened the door again, frowning at the shirtless, starry-eyed weirdo. Yes? He asked, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. You're a straw hat, right? The guy shouted, just a little too loud in the calm and peaceful garden outside of the charming little cottage. Everything about this guy was out of place, and his question caught Usopp completely off guard. Yes, and you are? The man shrieked, like a schoolgirl meeting an idol. It was concerning, but it also kind of reminded him of someone. You have got to be Soge King, right? Caused trouble with the Straw Hats at Water 7 and never spotted again? Burned the world government flag? Is that like a secret identity? Did you ever have another wanted poster? Don't answer that. Stupid question. I would know if you had. Wait a minute. Are you the guy in the background of Luffy Senpai's wanted poster? I never put that together. Soge King is the background guy? Ah! Will you sign this? Sure enough, the man had a Soge King wanted poster in hand and was holding it out. He even had a pen. He had come prepared. Normally, Usopp would eat this up. He certainly liked the idea of having fans and followers and playing up his own bravado, but really? At the end of the world, in this fairy tale village, he felt like he was moving through some kind of bizarre dream, an automaton that took the paper, signed the name Soge King, and handed it back with jerky movements. Then he shut the door, not acknowledging the continued shrieking that accompanied the signature, or the cut-off start of the question, So, should I call you Soge King or Usopp? Year 2, Day 322. All I ever wanted was to live free. It was so unattainable when I was young. A dream, an aspiration. From the moment he put that straw hat on my head, I swore I would never allow another person to control my destiny. I was free. The day he made me one of his crew, he bound me in loyalty while also giving me the freedom to choose my path. It doesn't quite make sense, right? I belong to him, to all of them, from the moment Arlong fell. They belong to me, too. How can being tied so closely to others equate so well to freedom? It all comes down to trust, maybe. I live with the people here. They work with me, fight with me, sometimes die with me. I call some of them friend. It seems on the surface to tick all the boxes, doesn't it? I belong to them, but I'm not really free here. The plant ties us all down. They are not nakama. I miss them so much it hurts to think about. I've started to wonder if maybe I should try to forget.